Welcome to the deep dive. Here, we take your sources, we dig into them, and we pull out the key insights to get you up to speed quickly. Today, we're really getting into something fascinating. The INFJ personality type. You send over a stack of really rich material on this. Sometimes they're called the counselor or the advocate. And what jumps out right away, just like your sources highlight, is how incredibly rare this type is.
Really is striking.
Yeah.
The sources consistently show INFJs make up, what, maybe 1% to 3% of the U.S. population. That makes them the least common type overall. And it's even more pronounced among men, only about 1.4% compared to maybe 3.1% of women.
Wow.
It really makes you wonder, what is it about a personality type that makes it so uncommon, but at the same time potentially so impactful?
Exactly. And that really
Right.
sets up our mission for this deep dive, doesn't it? We want to unpack what really makes an INFJ tick, understand their unique way of thinking, their core values, what drives them, and also how they handle things like relationships and careers. Plus, we'll definitely look at some of those surprising contradictions that make them seem so peculiar. Okay, let's get into it. So, your sources break down the acronym INFJ: introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging. Maybe we can start there. For someone who kind of gets the basics, what's the distinct flavor each letter brings to the INFJ profile?
Right. Okay. So if we piece this together, I introverted means they're energized by their inner world. Time alone, reflection, that's where they recharge.
Mm-hmm.
Then intuitive, this is key. They're less about the concrete facts right in front of them and more about the underlying patterns, the possibilities, the what ifs, ideas and concepts.
Okay.
F for feeling. This means their decisions are really guided by their values, by empathy, by how things impact people, rather than, say, purely logical analysis. It's about personal conviction. And J, judging. Now, this doesn't mean judgmental. It means they prefer structure, planning, organization. They like to have things decided rather than leaving options endlessly open. Put it all together, and you get someone who's often, you know, intensely idealistic, very authentic, deeply empathetic. The sources often call them these thoughtful nurturers with a really strong sense of personal integrity.
So definitely not just sitting around dreaming then.
Hmm.
Your sources really hammer home this drive they have to take those big ideas, those abstract thoughts, and actually do something with them to make a real impact.
Absolutely. And what's fascinating, I think, is that it's not just a vague wish for a better world. It's described as this like constant internal process, almost like synthesizing patterns to build a concrete master plan for positive change. They're deeply interested in understanding the big picture culture, society, the universe, seeing how every little action might ripple outwards. And this pushes them to live up to their own potential too. It's this interesting mix of huge vision and this practical desire to actually implement it, which raises a question for you listening. How do they juggle those really big dreams with just, well, the practicalities of everyday life?
Yeah, that's a good point. And it's clear from the sources, too, they're not looking for a huge crowd of friends. It's more about finding those really deep, meaningful connections. They crave that emotional intimacy, but only with a few trusted people. It's absolutely a quality over quantity for them. Authenticity and trust are paramount. They don't just open up to anyone.
Okay, so moving from their inner world,
Mm.
how other people see them, this is where it gets really interesting, according to your sources. Lots of contradictions here. They often come across as quiet, caring, maybe sensitive, great listeners. But then there's this, well, intensity simmering beneath the surface.
Exactly. That calm exterior, it definitely can hide a very complex inner life. They're doing a lot of deep thinking, especially about ethics, and they feel things really profoundly. So acquaintances might see them as quiet, be serious, gentle, but sometimes also a bit reclusive, maybe even intimidating. There can be a sort of moodiness or aloofness sometimes to that quiet intensity you mentioned. And it totally tracks with what your sources say about them being hard to really know. It's not like they're being deliberately secretive,
Yeah.
more hesitant to connect deeply unless they feel truly understood or sense that the other person's values align with theirs. They're fiercely protective of their own moral code. And they'll pull back hard if they feel those values are disrespected or someone's intentions don't seem pure. Which leads us right into one of the most famous or maybe infamous INFJ traits,
Yeah,
the
I love
door
that.
slam, right?
Right.
The door slam. For anyone not familiar, this is when an INFJ just decisively cuts someone out of their life. It can seem really sudden, really harsh from the outside, but the sources give us the INFJ perspective on this.
Yeah, and it's crucial to understand that perspective because while it looks drastic, it's usually the result of a long internal process. It's not impulsive. For the INFJ, it signals they've reached a point where they just cannot keep investing emotional energy into a relationship, either because their efforts aren't being met Or worse, the relationship has become toxic, genuinely harmful to them. So it's really an act of self-preservation. To avoid complete emotional burnout, they're consciously deciding to redirect that energy elsewhere.
But here's a really interesting twist the sources point out. Sometimes that door isn't like bolted shut forever.
Well,
An INFJ might still care even years down the line. And very, very rarely, they might actually reach out again. Apparently, if you are ever let back in after a door slam, it's a huge deal. That means that connection was incredibly significant to them. But yeah, extremely rare.
definitely rare.
And given that need for deep connection, it kind of makes sense that another thing your sources highlight is how much they dislike small talk. They really struggle with it. They want those meaningful conversations, right? The surface level chat just feels draining or maybe inauthentic to them.
Yeah, it connects to their overall way of being. And broadening that view, their empathy, it's so high they often get called emotional sponges. They just involuntarily absorb and mirror the feelings around them. Now, that ability helps them understand people incredibly deeply, and it fuels their desire to help. But wow, it can be exhausting, utterly draining. And this tendency to put others' needs first can lead them to stretch themselves too thin, which then forces those periods of withdrawal, pulling back to recharge.
Ah.
And that sudden quietness can surprise people who are used to them being very available and engaged. That's exactly why you hear them called the most extroverted introverts. They engage deeply, intensely even, but then they absolutely need to retreat to find their balance again.
Okay, so we've talked about what an INFJ is like, how they're perceived. But to really get it, your sources suggest we need to go deeper, right? Inside their minds, look at the cognitive functions. These are like the mental tools, the building blocks of their personality. And for the INFJ, they're stacked in a very particular order.
Exactly, and understanding the stack is key.
Yeah.
Their dominant function, the driver, is introverted intuition. We call it NIA. Now, this isn't just vague intuition. It's a very specific internal focus. They're constantly scanning for patterns, hidden meanings, ripple effects, things others might totally miss. They're less focused on the what is and more on the what could be, the ultimate potential. This often leads to that sense of having a singular vision or even a sort of master plan for their lives, always looking towards that future outcome.
That makes so much sense. It explains those epiphanies. Your sources mention the insights that feel like they come out of the blue. It's because their mind is just constantly working in the background, connecting dots, figuring out future implications. Does that internal focus, that perspective shifting, also fuel their empathy?
Precisely. It flows right into their next function, the auxiliary one, extroverted feeling, or FE. FE is their primary way of interacting with the outer world. It gives them that sharp antenna for other people's emotions, what the group needs. It drives them to create harmony.
Right.
It's why they're often such good listeners and nurturers, why they can be those emotional sponges. But the downside, as the sources point out, is that they can sometimes lose track of their own needs in the process. They might overextend themselves, trying to keep everyone happy, or become like social chameleons, adapting to fit in, which can leave them feeling, well, a bit fake or inauthentic later.
Ah, okay. So that explains, again, why they need that alone time. It's not just recharging, it's like checking back in with themselves, making sure they're still aligned with their own values.
Exactly. It's crucial for their authenticity. Then, next in the stack, we have their tertiary function, introverted thinking, or T. T brings in a desire for logic, for understanding how things work internally. It pushes them towards seeking radical truth and honesty, as some sources put it. They can be real information junkies, wanting to understand systems like psychology, wanting every piece of the puzzle to fit logically.
Oh, okay.
But here's the potential conflict. What happens when that logical T clashes with their harmony-seeking Fae?
Right, and your sources touch on that. They say sometimes Fae can kind of overpower T, like they might suppress a logical point or sacrifice their own needs just to keep the peace.
That can happen, yeah. But the sources also suggest that developing T, giving it more space, is really important for them. It helps them stand up for themselves, articulate their reasoning clearly, and be logical, not just focused on group feelings. It helps them find their voice.
Makes sense. And the last one, the least developed.
That's their inferior function. Extroverted sensing, or say, being inferior means it's their weakest spot, the area they're least comfortable with. Say is all about engaging with the physical world in the present moment, noticing details, enjoying sensory experiences, taking action based on current reality. INFJs can sometimes struggle here, maybe getting lost in their heads, neglecting physical needs, or feeling awkward with spontaneous action.
Hmm.
But paradoxically, your sources emphasize how vital developing say is. It's the anchor. It helps ground their big knee visions in reality. It helps them appreciate simple things like nature, good food, physical activity like hiking or dancing. It pulls them out of just thinking and into doing.
So say is the balance for that dreamy knee. Got it. And the sources warn that without it, their insights might just stay abstract, not really land in the real world. And there was that specific warning, too, about the Niti loop.
Yes, the ni-ti loop. That's a really important concept. It happens when they bypass their feeling and sensing C functions, essentially retreating inward. They get stuck just cycling between their internal intuition, ni, and internal logic, T.
Okay.
This can make them seem detached, overly critical, maybe cold, and stuck in analysis paralysis. They lose touch with people and with the real world around them.
Mm.
It's more than just needing alone time. It's becoming truly isolated in their own thoughts. Developing Phi and C helps prevent or break that loop.
Okay, that clarifies a lot about their inner workings. Let's shift now to how all this plays out in their actual lives.
Yep.
Your sources paint them as generally high achievers, right? In school, at work. They seem to have this perfectionist streak, putting a ton of effort into getting things just right, down to the tiny details.
That's definitely a recurring theme. And related to that, their career paths are interesting. The sources suggest they really thrive in roles where they can use that creativity, that empathy, that drive to help people. So you often see them drawn to things like counseling, psychology, writing, teaching, maybe working for nonprofits, anywhere they feel they're making a difference based on their principles. Where they might struggle is in jobs that are highly repetitive, lack meaning, or require them to be, say, very assertive or authoritarian managers. That doesn't usually sit well with their Phi.
And relationships, we touched on the depth over breadth thing. That small core circle of deep, long-lasting friendships sounds absolutely essential. They're described as amazing listeners, really valuing partners who share their core values, who offer that deep emotional connection, sincerity, honesty. Authenticity is huge.
Absolutely huge. Which brings up compatibility. Now, these things are always generalities, but your sources often point towards types like ENTP and ENFP as being particularly good matches.
Oh, interesting. Why those?
Well, the thinking is they often bring that external energy, intellectual curiosity, and warmth that can really complement the INFJ's internal depth and seriousness. They can draw the INFJ out a bit. Conversely, types like ISTP and ESTP are often listed as least compatible, perhaps because their focus on immediate action and concrete reality might clash with the INFJ's more abstract, future-oriented style. And their parenting style, too, is noted as being very involved. Close, connected, high standards, but focused on encouraging potential, kindness, compassion.
And speaking of potential, it seems INFJs often have a ton of hobbies and interests, right? Like photography, music, writing, art.
With so many interests, it's a vital creative outlet for them, a way to process all those intense emotions they absorb.
But your sources also mention this can be a bit tricky for them. Like having so many interests plus that perfectionism can make it hard to actually choose one path or feel like they're mastering anything.
That's a common struggle, yeah. That diffusion of energy combined with wanting to do everything perfectly, it could be paralyzing sometimes.
And another layer of complexity, your sources mention subtypes. INFJA and INFJT.
Right. This comes from a different model, but it adds nuance. The A is for assertive. These INFJs tend to be a bit more confident, perhaps more relaxed under stress. The T is for turbulent. They might be less self-assured, more prone to stress and self-doubt, perhaps more driven by that perfectionism. So even within this rare type, there's variation in how they navigate the world.
It's really cool, actually, to see the examples your sources give of people who might fit this type. Real heavy hitters. We're talking historical figures like Gandhi, Eleanor Roosevelt, Carl Jung himself, and then contemporary people like Brené Brown, maybe J.K. Rowling.
Yeah, those names come up.
And even fictional characters, Luke Skywalker, Dumbledore, Atticus Finch, Lisa Simpson. It really helps paint a picture, doesn't it? Shows the kind of impact their idealism and deep conviction can have across so many different areas.
It really does bring the type to life.
So wrapping this all up, what's the takeaway for you, our listener? We've definitely seen the INFJ as this fascinating bundle of contradictions, really. Quiet but intense, logical but deeply emotional. Idealistic yet surprisingly pragmatic when it comes to wanting positive change. They're kind of easygoing perfectionists in a weird way.
Yeah, I think if you step back and look at the bigger picture,
Yeah.
the INFJ journey seems to be this constant balancing act, balancing that incredibly rich inner world with the demands of the outside world. They're always striving to make a meaningful impact, but they have to navigate that profound empathy and their very unique way of processing information. They're resilient, though, driven by this really strong internal moral compass. They remain rare, definitely complex, but there's this underlying drive to understand things deeply and ultimately to make things better.
They really do sound like a rare gift, often working behind the scenes maybe, trying to uplift others, spread compassion. And hopefully now, you, the listener, whether you are an INFJ or you know one, or maybe just suspect you know one, you have a much deeper appreciation for what makes this personality type so, well, special.
And maybe this leaves you with a question to mull over. Knowing what you know now, how might you change how you interact with an INFJ in your life? How could you better understand or support that quiet visionary? Or perhaps, if parts of this resonated with you personally, how might you lean into and better embrace the strengths of your own inner world? Something to think about.
Definitely food for thought. Until our next deep dive, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep learning.